learning how to blend business and parenting is tough, whether it's business or whether it's relationships or whether it's parenting. I mean, that is pivotal on being successful at whatever you're doing, is you have to be honest with yourself. I think parenting can expose your flaws in a hurry.
Zucchinis? Give me the paper. Nice.
I love you, Texas.
Hey guys, I'm Young, a full-time dad and a full-time professional with the goal to become the best parent possible. The Girl Dad Show is my journey interviewing fellow working parents aspiring to be both good at work and parenting. I'm going to do this by gathering and sharing unfiltered perspectives from my guests. So join me as I research parenthood one interview at a time. Robert, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining me on my podcast today.
You bet. How's it going?
It's going really good. Thank you. Let's jump right into it. So why don't you tell me and the listeners what you do for a living?
Yeah, so I'm an employee benefits consultant, which, many folks listening maybe like my mother and have no idea what that is. But in the simplest form, in order for businesses to offer medical, dental, vision, et cetera, as a part of their employee benefits package to their employees, they partner with a broker or consultant to go out to the various insurance carriers in the insurance market, procure quotes, find the best contracts, and then select and design that benefits program for them and their employees. And that's what I do behind the scenes. So using kind of a sports analogy, if you will, we're the athlete's agent or the business, if you will. And then we work on their behalf and negotiate and secure the best contract with the best team, which in our case is the insurance carriers.
That's awesome. And then do you have any big projects that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So almost 70% of employers renew their benefits for January 1st. So we've just wrapped up our busy renewal season a few weeks ago. I took a brief vacation with family and friends over the holiday weekend. And now, the big shift here for us is focusing on new business, picking up on the prospecting efforts that we've done, late in 2021 and looking to shift gears and grow the business this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm actually pretty familiar with the space. I don't know if I talked to you about my time, but at Limelight Health, but I was in the insurance space on the technology side, trying to build software for the employee benefit space. So I definitely remember the Q4 crunch, open renewal season and how busy it got, because we were trying to sell into brokers and insurance carriers, and Q4 was like a forget about it, like 3 months. That's when we went and built our software and caught up on tech deficit, because there was nobody that wanted to talk to us during Q4 because they were so busy. They're so busy doing open renewals.
It's definitely not that you don't want to. It's just you got to find the time, right? And there's not much of it in the October, November timeframe.
Yeah. Have you always been in the space, or did you join kind of the employee benefit space later on, or what was the journey there?
I have actually. So started right out of college, was recruited out of college on the insurance carrier side. I spent, I guess, about 13 years working for Unum, which is the largest disability and life lead management carrier. So started in Houston for 4 years doing that, and then moved to Austin in 2011. And recently made the jump over to the consulting side. So got away from the carrier side, moved over to the broker consultant side almost 4 years ago.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were a carrier. That's awesome. So what was the major differences that you saw from being a carrier to the consulting side?
That's a good question. I think, on the insurance carrier side, you kind of feel like a hamster on a wheel, and you're responding to a number of different brokers across, a particular region, and it got to be very monotonous and repetitive, and, felt like I could have a much more significant impact on employers and clients, moving over to the consultant side, which turned out to be true. And so on the consultant side, it's much more direct client facing impact, being able to be a part of a business, in Austin, it's just a ton of fun working with startups and then, trying to have an impact on their business, albeit maybe small, and their success as they grow and move into the, next stage of the company life cycle there.
Yeah, that's actually how we met, right? Like we met at that one party here in Austin. It was like that. It was like a startup venture VC party.
That's right. Yeah, with early growth.
That's right. And so, yeah, I'm assuming that's a lot more fun, right? Because you didn't necessarily do that in Houston. Do you feel like there's a big difference in the Houston market as in the Austin market?
For sure. Yes. I mean, naturally with the level of entrepreneurship that's here in Austin. Things like getting out and meeting folks and being a part of the business community. That's definitely the fun part of the job. Meeting new people, meeting new entrepreneurs, executives, and then just learning what's going on in the tech space is a ton of fun.
Yeah, it definitely is. I definitely love Austin a lot, and I mean, I came from San Francisco, so I kind of came from the tech space to a certain degree. But coming here, it's you could feel like the early stages of it just kind of like ballooning forward, right? Like it's really really exciting to see all the entrepreneurial spirit and all the startup scene kind of grow here. It's really fun.
Absolutely.
But I do remember during dinner we were having such a good time talking about so much stuff. I even think we talked about. I know we talked about kids, which is why I invited you to this podcast. So we'll definitely get to that. But I think we also talked about podcasting. Did you also used to run a podcast? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, a good question. I wouldn't call it a podcast. So a former colleague of mine and I used to would sit down with various business partners and clients in our business that we ran across, and we would record a 2 to 5 minute kind of interview, if we will, and we posted on LinkedIn. And it was, really kind of the premise of the podcast, I guess, if you want to call it that, was, we'd ask 3 or 4 questions related to their business to give them an opportunity and a platform to tell our connections about their business. And then we would ask 3 or 4 fun, get to know you type questions like, if you could play golf with anybody in the world, dead or alive, who would it be? So just those type of questions. So it was fun. We started doing that in early 2020, and then COVID hit. So that killed it, and never really picked it back up.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think that it's like so funny because I think that conversation led to me telling you that I actually had a podcast and all this other stuff. But
here
I think
we
we
are.
should get back into it. Yeah, here we go. That's right. I still think it's a great idea. I think you should keep doing that, or I don't know, maybe we could do it together. But I think that'd be really fun to do some sort of like interviewing of different startups and stuff, and what they're working on, giving them a little platform. I think it's a really great idea, especially just focused on Austin. There's a huge appetite for Austin, Austin growth, Austin stories, and I think there's a lot of eyeballs kind of like looking at Austin to see what happens next year.
Absolutely, yes.
So let's talk about it. Since this is a parenting podcast, talk to me about your kids.
Yeah, so I've got 2 boys. My oldest actually turns 11 on February 1st. He was born 2 days after my wife and I's first anniversary. So we weren't married long before we had kids and had to figure out parenting.
Nice.
But Burr's my sports junkie. He loves football, baseball, snow skiing. We actually just got back from skiing, and he progressed more on the mountain this year, I think, than any other. And so really, really developed a love and passion for it this past year. It was fun to watch, a lot of proud dad moments, if you will.
Yeah.
He's also developed, not necessarily podcast related, but somewhat, but somewhere he's developed this passion for video editing. I think watching something like Dude Perfect, and so he'll record a bunch of videos and try to edit them together. He's got his own little YouTube channel, and he's even done some animated stuff with Legos, which is fun to watch, especially an 11-year-old, and him pick up that kind of passion. But he's my strong-willed one, very, very competitive. I can think back of when my wife was pregnant with him, and I'm sure as parents, many of us have done this before, but just I can remember back thinking, gosh, I hope he gets the best qualities of her and I, right?
Yeah.
Well, from a temperament standpoint, I think he got both of our worst qualities, but it's part of the parenting process is really to learn and adapt and figure out how to best communicate with people, and that's what they are. And I think a lot of times that we forget that as parents is that it is another person. But my youngest is almost exactly 5 years younger than him. He turned 6 on February 17th.
Wow, February too.
Yeah. So
everything happens in the beginning of the year for you, huh?
It does. Yes. Yeah. My birthday's in January. They're both birthdays in February. So we've got a lot going on at the beginning of the year. But he's my little long blonde hair, sweetheart, loves animals, loves music, loves performing, loves people. He's never met a stranger. He's always out in the front yard, can entertain himself for hours, but talking with the neighbors as they come by. So he's a little less interested in sports probably, but I've kept him involved really for two reasons. One, I really wanted to give him the opportunity to figure out if he was really interested or not. And then two, I'm a strong believer in the life lessons that are learned through sports. And so, he had a ton of fun skiing this past weekend too, advanced more than he ever has before as well. And I think really developed a passion for it because he got the right instruction. So, that's Bo. He's like I said, fun loving one.
Yeah, I love that you have two boys. I have two girls, so it's kind of fun that we have the opposite experience here in that sense. But when you talk about the sports values and what that instills in them, are you talking about like team sports, or are you talking about anything that's athletic?
Well, I think you can draw parallels, whether it's team sport or individual sport. I was always involved in team sports growing up. I didn't. I love golf now, but I didn't start playing golf until after I met my wife. And she's the one that got me involved in golf, and she probably regrets it to this day. But but team sports is really where, in particular football. I just think football is the amount of parallels that can be drawn to whether it's business or life or parenting or relationships or what, there's always adversity. And usually that adversity in football is when you're tired, you're hot, you're sweaty, and then learning how to deal with that, and respond in a positive way is, can be drawn later on in life in a number of different ways.
It's awesome. What other sports did you play?
Football and baseball primarily. And then my family started taking us skiing, I think when I was 11 or 12. And so, those inherently have been passed down to my kiddos.
That's awesome. No, I mean, yeah, I think that it's like the same thing that we're doing in an opposite way, right? Like your hobbies inherently become their hobbies to a certain degree, except until they tell you that they don't want it to be their hobbies, right? Like sounds like Bo's like, hey, I don't really care to do this, or at least he's deviating from that, and who knows, maybe he'll turn around at 11, but at least as his 6-year-old self, it sounds like he's already starting to tell you that he doesn't, where your oldest is like loving it, right?
He's more of my Austin, flower child. Probably going to be, some, more musically inclined. He likes at church. He likes to be, in the music, kids music class and all that stuff. So,
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's now speaking my language. My wife's a huge sports fan. She loves like team sports, and she loves baseball and all that good stuff. And I don't know anything about it. Like I don't even know the rules. Like I usually got chosen during the kid games, because I had some sense of like EQ and made friends pretty easily. So people would choose me just from the friendship. And then after that first game, I was the last one chosen because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't know the rules. I don't know how to play anything. But I was very into music growing up. So I'm definitely trying to push my daughters into music. And I mean, obviously I'm trying not to impose that on them, but I would really love it if they were musicians. That would be like so amazing for me. And my wife wants to send them out.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, them gravitate towards one thing or another. I mean, it's funny because, our kids are so different. My kids are so different. Everybody's kids, I think, are probably very different from each other. But, I've got one that's, wanting to be outside dribbling a basketball or playing football or something. I got another one that's up in his room strumming on a guitar, screaming, singing at the and it's adorable, but it's just funny how different your own children can be, right?
Yeah. Tell me about your childhood. How'd you grow up?
That's a good question. So my parents, we're not poor, I would not say, but definitely grew up very middle class, and not upper middle class, but blue collar family, small town. My mom was a great mom, is a great mom. She struggled, I think, with some of her own demons, particularly I was born a triplet.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I was born a triplet. So, but my other two brothers did not make it. So, yeah. And so, my mom, obviously very, very hard on my mom, much more so on her than it was ever on me, just because I was too young to know the difference, right?
Yeah.
but she struggled with that for a long time, I think, naturally. And then, she was married 3 times. But, I still to this day really admire, how she raised and cared for me. Always did her best to provide for me. I actually never met my biological father. But her third husband is who I always considered and called my dad. He adopted me when I was 11.
Oh, wow.
And he owned a small construction company, still does. Worked extremely hard. I would attribute my work ethic from what I learned from him. And then I was also always very close to my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad, really primarily because they helped raise me before my dad was in the picture.
Yeah,
my adopted dad was in the picture. And so was always very close to them. Fortunately, they're both still with us. My grandfather actually just celebrated his 90th birthday.
Oh, congratulations. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
It's awesome. What's even more awesome is they've been married for 72 years, which is, crazy, especially if you think about, our culture and society today and how fragile marriage, is, just naturally. So it's really cool, great role models. And I definitely consider him, one of my heroes. And was fortunate they had more money than my parents did, and was fortunate to be able to go and travel a lot with them. And that's probably where I picked up my passion for travel, but also my ambition and drive to succeed and want something more and better for my family.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I've got I inherited a brother whenever my mom got married to my adopted dad. He's 5 months older than me. And then we both had my sister was born. She's 10 years younger than both of us. So I got a younger sister, older brother. And that's probably the shorter version.
Wow. Oh, man, that's amazing. Amazing amount of things we can unpack there. That's incredible. The biggest one I want to unpack, though, for sure on this podcast, because, I think it's pretty relevant, is how does that impact you with raising your kids? Like, have you flowed any of that over, or there been any qualms about that, or insecurities that come from it, or things that you pull from it that are beneficial, or how does that relate to you being a dad as you think about your childhood?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for one, having never met my biological father, I think probably has the most impact on being very protective, being very intentional about being involved, being wanting to be a good dad. I think I'm probably more, and rightfully so, and fairly so, probably more self-critical of myself, which I don't know necessarily doesn't necessarily make me a better dad unless you actually act on what you're being said. Right?
Yeah.
But that's probably the most impact. I think, twofold would be, our kids are 5 years apart, and, making the decision, are we going to have one kid or 2 kids? I would say, having lost the opportunity to have 2 brothers, definitely went into, the desire and want to have, for my oldest to have a brother. Right.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. And then you said your mom and dad are still here. So what do they think about everything and how you're being a dad? Have they given you any feedback about your parenting skills?
Fortunately, they really haven't. And they will if I ask, which I think is which is good. But they've I cannot think of a time ever whenever they were like, you should do this, or you should try this.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So they've been good parents in that regard. They've been good parents, period. But in particular, in that regard, in terms of being more of a what would you call it, a mentor type than a parent.
Yeah, it's the trick, right? I've been learning about this as I've been doing this podcast, is that as a parent, you have to learn how to change yourself during the stages of their growth, right? And so it sounds like your parents were smart enough to know that they were supposed to change who they were for you as you became a parent and became more of a mentor type, right?
Right.
Yeah, my parents are not like that. I mean, they still think I'm like 12 years old, and I have like, snot up my nose and like, I forgot to wear my underwear or something, like they, I mean, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they're great parents. I'm making fun of them, but yeah, they still baby the crap out of me, right? Like they definitely treat me like a little kid still, and I'm like, I'm 40 years old, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's like constantly having to remind them that, yeah, I'm pretty capable of taking care of myself and doing things at this point. But that's great, man. I'm glad
that's
that
hilarious.
yeah, that you don't have to go through that. Because I think there's like, it's like, it's also part of our thing, right? Like, can we also adapt to our kids as they grow? Because I'm sure you've had to change the parenting style already with the even the difference in the 6 and 11-year-old. I bet it's completely
Yes.
different. Yeah, the 11-year-old's probably really formulating his own self and identity, and where the 6-year-old's still probably a little more eager to learn. And I'm sure you're even dealing with it right now, right?
Oh, for sure. My wife and I joke all the time. I can remember getting married, and people are like, "Oh, marriage is hard," and but et cetera, et cetera. And but we joke all the time that the marriage part's fairly easy. It's parenting is hard.
Yeah,
Parenting is very hard.
yeah,
Uh, and especially with kids that are 5 years apart. People are another question you get often get is what do you think about having kids that are 5 years apart versus 18 months or 2 years apart? I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, right? Um, and it's just
actually, what are they? Because my kids are 2 years apart. Yeah, and I love
so
it.
I couldn't tell you the pros and cons of that because I only have mine. I mean, the pros and cons I would say of having them 5 years apart is particularly when they're young is you have a helper, right?
Mm,
You've got one that can put on his own shoes and put on his own clothes, and then he can help with the younger one. And now that they're older, he's not there yet, but he's getting close to an age where we can go out on a date and he can stay here versus having to hire a babysitter. So those are obviously pros, but cons, I would say is they're not extremely close because they're not extremely close, right?
yeah,
Uh, and
their
so
development cycles are so far apart, right? Especially at this
right,
age. Yeah,
right. And so now does that change as they get older? I don't know, to be determined, I guess. And
it
it's
totally
I know
does.
I have some friends that grew up with siblings that were 5 years younger. I mean, my sister's 10 years younger. We're not extremely close just because we were, in completely different stages of life growing up for the longest time. And, that's just kind of the way it is, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. I have a 6-year gap with my little brother, and I feel like we've been fairly close. And I think as we've gotten older, it's gotten easier to like, match, like kind of the lifestyle and life stage. I don't know. As you get like 40 years old, I think it just becomes less different.
Yes.
Everything's the same problem, right? To a certain degree.
Percentage wise, I said this way, percentage wise, you actually get closer in age, right?
Yeah,
When
exactly. There you go.
10
Yeah.
versus 5 is 50% difference, but
Yeah.
35 versus 30, it's, you're a
Oh
lot
yeah.
closer in age at that
That's
point.
right. That's a good way to look at it. That's exactly it. You're kind of in the same bracket at that point.
Yes.
Very cool. What do your kids think about what you do for a living?
I don't think they know what I do for a living.
Does anybody? Does your wife know what you do for a living?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I got kind of, I'm not a firefighter. I'm not I'm not, building something, like tangible, I guess, if you will. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's difficult to explain to a 10-year-old
Yeah.
what insurance is, right? And so, they think I'm on the computer and on the phone all the time. Which is, I guess, fairly, and then or not here. Which is probably the hardest part because it does require some early mornings and late nights, being away, and I think that's learning how to blend business and parenting is tough. Probably the tougher part of the job, especially when you're trying to grow something, right? So. Yeah, to answer your question though, I don't really think they understand what I do.
That's awesome. My kids don't understand what I do either. Like my oldest, she's gonna be turning 5, so she's 4 right now, but she's almost 5, and she'll like she'll like mimic me, and she'll like basically pretend to push buttons on a keyboard. She's like, look at me, I'm working. I'm like, Dad, I'm working. And yeah, it's pretty funny. And like they'll just come into this like my office and just like jump in and start talking to people that I'm talking to. Like they just like have no context, right? It's just like so hard to explain at this point.
My wife asked me for this, for the interview. She's like, should we be here and have have the kids come jump on your lap in the middle of the interview? And I was like, well, I don't know how if I can hold my concentration. So
I gave up. I gave up on even trying. I've noticed that by not closing the door, the percentages of them interrupting go down. So it's like when you close the door, they're like, "Oh, something's going on in here," and they have to come in. Or if I keep it open, they're just like, "Oh, I can hear them, I can see them," and they'll come in, but it's just much less frequent. I don't know. Have you noticed that? Or
it makes sense. Well, on my home office, there is no door, so I don't.
there's no. It's always open. Yeah,
it's always open. I probably need to get a door, but usually if it's something where I need to close the door, I guess, if you will, or gonna have a meeting, then I'll wait to go into the actual office, or go in another room or something like that and close the door.
You have a brick and mortar office.
We do. Yes.
Are you guys doing hybrid, or are you guys doing what does that look like?
I mean, it's just like everybody else, right? It changes every day.
Yeah.
So every time we get a plan, we get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
But I think hybrid for the most part. As for the consultants, salespeople, we've been able to go into the office at a certain capacity. I'd say, I think going back to maybe June 2020.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really start going back consistently or often until probably earlier this year, maybe summertime.
Nice.
Probably a little more frequently. So I usually go in, I'd say probably 2 to 3 days a week. If I've got meetings and things that are going on in town,
yeah,
then I'll go in. I usually don't go in just to go in, because it's 45 minutes, an hour and a half of drive time. I could be doing something productive.
Yeah, like hanging out with your kids or
exactly
working out or something. Yeah,
that's probably a big silver lining of the pandemic is the time being able to spend with the kiddos and stuff that wouldn't have probably otherwise.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's actually helped you be a better dad? That time not commuting and that increased time with the kids, or has it actually?
I'd like to think so. I guess I'd have to ask them. But
yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. But I mean, in your perspective, it sounds like you have some inkling that it's been better, right? It's been beneficial.
Yeah, you at least here's I guess kind of a key point or takeaway. Is there's a difference between being here and being present, and so being present today in a digital world where you got an iPhone and you're always on screen time and those type of things. Sometimes it can be hard, even though you're physically there. Are you mentally there? So I would definitely say physically been here a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Mentally here, sometimes that's probably where I struggle.
Yeah. When it goes back to what you said, right? Like you're trying to build something and you're trying to make more than you had growing up. And so that requires a little bit of sacrifice. And it's hard to communicate that to kids, like explain to them, like, especially when you're sitting at home on a computer, just like talking to people. They're like, what the heck? Like, why can't you hang out with me instead? I mean,
exactly.
It doesn't show in this manicured view here, but like literally 2 feet here, there's like magnet tiles like all down here and like a princess castle right here. You know what I mean? Like there's just like a littering of toys that like you could see where my kid like trailed out as she was going out this way, So it's part of, I think, like just the new things that we've been learning, right? As being parents and working and like you said, trying to grow things. So I do have to ask about the growth thing though. So as you're trying to grow and build, what does that success look like for you? So what are you trying to grow to? What's your goal there? Are you just trying to make more money, more career, like title? Like what does that mean to you?
Good question. I guess define success, right? It's there's so many different ways I think you could answer that. One for me is making those around me, helping to make those around me better and to help them reach their goals, I think is a big part of what drives me, whether it's a friend and helping their business, whether it's a partner, in the marketplace, help grow their business or help connect them to someone that's going to be a big win for them. Whether it's someone, a colleague, you're trying to help them grow into a new position and empower them. Those are the things, I guess, that are probably the most rewarding, for me in business. Two is, not to make the same mistake twice. To be better, to be better today than I was yesterday. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's one brick at a time is how you build an empire, and that's kind of how I approach day to day. Another one for me, I guess, is goal attainment. I think I've always been a big goal setter. I know there's various opinions on goal setting and whatnot but I think spending some time to create an annual business plan, have small and large goals, daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly, annual. And then as you accomplish those, check them off and then create a new one. And then you asked about growth. I'd say, probably as a leader, as a mentor, as a resource for others is where I try to look to grow the most. And then, I'm in a business really that, success is easily defined for you. It's a highly production related business. So you can tell real quick, if you're being successful or not, both from a production standpoint and financially, but kind of all of the above. I would say, the money part obviously is important for all of us, right? I mean, that's really why we go to work every day. But I think that comes, you do all the other things right. You do all the blocking and tackling and all that stuff. That the money, that reward comes on the back end.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. It's definitely one of those things I can put your picture with the view of the ocean in the background, put a quote in the front. It'll be very Instagram worthy. Yeah, I love it. It's very good. Yeah. I will say, just on a personal note, I feel like there's this thing that I've been learning. I've always been inside, like a W-2, just kind of in the tech side. Right? I've been on the tech startup side as an operator, and kind of being a consultant the last 2 years, I've realized that very similar to what you said, the proof is kind of in the output, right? How well you did, because the more money you make and the more clients you have, just shows where that is. And what I turned around this corner, and I was kind of doing my self-reflection for 2021 and planning for 2022, because I'm also a big goal setter as well. I started realizing that I don't know necessarily if I started to quantify what that actual success was. And I'm probably a crazy thing to do, but it's too microscopic maybe in a certain degree. But I'm actually I'm trying to figure out how much I actually want to grow, both professionally and start increasing my growth as a dad, because I think that I may have accidentally veered a little too hard last year this way instead of this way in retrospect. Right. And I'm trying to figure out, I don't want to go to the opposite pendulum, but I want to figure out that balance, and I don't know if you've ever had those kind of thoughts, or you've ever sat down and had some retrospective or introspection on the balance between how much you build your business versus how much you build your dad time. But I'd love to hear what you think of that idea and that concept, and if you've ever had an experience like that.
Well, I think you're 100% correct. Yeah. I mean, it's, you said one thing, in that comment, self-reflection, right? And self-analyze. I think whether it's business or whether it's relationships or whether it's parenting, I mean, that is, I think, pivotal on being successful at whatever you're doing, is you have to be honest with yourself about how well or not well you're doing at whatever that particular thing is. And so, I constantly self-reflect that, whether it's, professionally, whether it's as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, whatever it is, should I be doing what I'm doing? Should I be doing it differently? I constantly lean on mentors. And, I think you have mentors for all of those different pieces, right? And all those different things. And I'm not an extremely creative person, but I will steal other people's ideas and apply them to my own life as much as possible. I'll lean on folks that I respect and admire and do it well. I can think of instances, constantly as a parent, I'll watch someone, interact with their their kid in a disciplinary, situation, and be like, wow, that was really cool how they did that. I want to apply that next time I'm approached with a similar situation. So yeah, I think self-analyzing, whatever it may be, whether it's that time you're devoted towards work versus towards family, or how you approach particular situations is extremely important in being successful at whatever you're doing.
It's awesome. And I think you kind of already answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So if I did ask you poignantly, how do you qualify success in parenting? What would you say?
I would say, again, I think there's a lot of parallels between business and parenting. And I would say I'd answer it probably in a similar way, is, how am I helping my kids achieve their goals? Am I teaching and coaching them to respond to different situations in the right way? And then when those situations come up again, are they responding, to that instruction? And if not, then how do you change, or maybe, how do you change the way you approach it? That would be, one way. And then, how do they respond when we're not around, or how do they act when we're not around, around other adults, whether other friends in school. And, I can think back, first having kids, and, you think back on your childhood and the opportunities you had to make decisions that were either really good or really bad. And, I think some of it, a lot of it is based off of, your parents and how they taught you. But I think a lot of it's luck and who you hang out with and choose to be your friends. And that's probably the scary part as a parent, is there's only so much you can do as a parent to build that foundation. And then you kind of have to hope that they choose the right friends to be around, and then make the right choices growing up for themselves, so that they don't either make the same mistakes you did, or go down a completely different path that could be even more destructive.
Yeah, no, that's really, really smart. And I think that that's so accurate, but like how you can do so much, but really like who they hang out with is going to really help form that, right? So
Right.
important. It's like so funny because I remember growing up, my mom always saying like, who you hanging out with is who you become. Like, careful who you choose your friends. Like all those things, right? And now it's like, oh, it's so true. Like you got to watch out for that stuff. And now I'm going to be quoting my mom as my kids grow up. Because it's so accurate. It's so accurate.
It is, and I think it just reinforces the importance of a strong community that you surround yourself in, as your friends, and then their kids, and et cetera. I think those just become extremely important to help, I guess, instill those values or whatnot into your own kids.
That's right. Hey, just one microscopic question here. Do you also set goals for your parenting and like your kids? Because I know you said there's a lot of parallels to businesses to parenting. I wonder if you actually have like an annual goal for your kids. Like, hey,
No,
yeah.
It's a great question, and I would say this is one reason why I like having these conversations is because you learn different things that maybe. To answer your question, no, I don't. And then you kind of think back and like, well, why not? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah.
I either never thought of it, or no one's asked me the question like you just did. So, I do think it's a good idea, and it's something that you could do. I mean, I have, just like everybody, you think about New Year's resolutions, there's personal, resolutions you have, just given that we're in January, about, hey, I'd like to, spend more time with my kids doing certain things or whatnot. I think one thing I've learned is from people is my calendar drives like my day, right? I mean, if it's not on my calendar, it's probably not going to get done. So carving out specific time on your calendar,
right,
for family, or I've asked myself, I mentioned it earlier. A lot of my business is early mornings, late nights, at events like where we met. So you have to ask yourself, well, do I need to be in an event every night this week? Is that particular event going to be worth my time, or worth sacrificing the time that I could be spending with the kiddos at home? And so I think you have to be intentional about putting that time on your calendar. So that would be, one way that's not really a goal, but something that I try to do is, be home 2 nights a week during the weekdays. And then if I'm not home, at least being home in time to put them to bed or something that where you can be there and be present.
It's awesome. Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I mean, I don't have goals for my parenting kids either. You just gave me the inspiration yourself, actually. You're the one who inspired me to inspire you, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I like the answer about like, oh, I treat it the same as work, right? You just like, hey, you have these same goals, and it's just the parallel of being a leader at work or being a leader at your house, right? And really adapting to building up the people in your and that you're interacting with. And I just like, oh yeah, but you also mentioned goal setting, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if he's actually like manually building up goals for his kids and his parenting. So now I'm going to do that because I think it's a great idea. Because I put out goals too, and I go knock it out, right? I go like I just back into it, I make it happen. But if I did the same thing with my parenting, I'm sure I would treat it the same way. I'd be like, hey, here's some tangible goals that I want to achieve, and here's some actions that I'm going to back into it. Like I would probably go knock it out.
Yes.
And instead of just being the superfluous, be a better parent this year. Like, what does that even mean? Okay, here's
Right.
what that means for me this year, right? Like, back it out, right? Like, that
You
actually
got to
might not be
define
a
it.
bad idea.
Yeah, you got to define it. You know what I mean? So that's one example of where I've done something, probably fairly well in the business world, but not fairly well as a parent. Or, another one is I typically don't make the same mistakes twice, from a professional standpoint, but I
Yeah.
make the same mistakes as a parent all the
Yeah. Yeah,
time.
I know. Yeah.
So, it's tough. Again, I think parenting is probably one of the most challenging things in life, and those that you admire from afar that are really really good parents are ones I have a tremendous amount of respect for and definitely hold in a very high regard. It's fun and rewarding to watch someone who, at least from afar, seems like a really really great parent.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm like, wow, that's a professional parent right there. I've seen those moments too, where I'm like, wow, they're doing a really good job of holding their temper. I'm losing mine over here just watching it. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah,
Exactly.
there's some really good parents out there for sure. Okay, cool. Hey, I do want to be cognizant of the time, so I want to make sure that we wrap up with my rapid fire questions. So I have 5 questions that I like to ask every guest, and I want to shoot them
Okay.
off right now, so we have some symmetry to all the episodes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. What advice do you have for other parents and soon to be parents?
This is a rapid fire question.
Yeah, it's a can of worms.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I would say. Oh my gosh. One would be, I'd say, for new parents is don't forget about your marriage. Would be one. Don't forget about your spouse.
Is your spouse sitting right there across from the
No,
camera?
she's not.
I'm
She's
just
not.
teasing you.
That would be one. I mean, it's easy to do, right? Because you have
It
this
is.
other life that all of a sudden just got thrust into your life,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
have to take care of it. And so, one advice that we got whenever we had our first one was 2 months after the baby's born, plan a night away without the baby, whether it's a staycation one night, whether it's a weekend, whatever it may be. Reserve that time for you and your spouse, and then carry that forward. Whether it's weekly or biweekly, date night, or monthly, whatever it may be. Don't forget about your spouse, because if you forget about your marriage, then your marriage is going to suffer. So that'd be one.
So sage.
Yeah. I'd say time management as well, which we hit on, multiple times, and then find activities that you and your kids enjoy doing together.
Oh, that's a good one. I love it. Very good. So what's if you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself pre-kids?
You are extremely selfish and lack the patience. You will make it rock. No, seriously, I think parenting can expose your flaws in a hurry.
Yeah.
So I'd probably tell myself, just, again, I could go back, carve out time for your kids and be present whenever you are having that time.
Nice. That's good. That's good feedback to yourself. I love it. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
Probably the same answer.
Yeah.
I always thought I was a pretty patient person, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So that would probably be the most surprising thing.
Yeah. You learn a lot about yourself for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I thought I was this super cool skater dude until I had kids, and I'm like, oh man, I'm really uptight.
Now you're uptight and driving a minivan.
That's right. Exactly. What's your all-time favorite business book?
So honestly, I'm not much of a reader at all.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I learned a few years ago that the average CEO or CFO reads something like 80 books a year. So in 2020,
Is it 80 a year?
It's something
I
ridiculous.
thought it was like
that.
20. Oh man, that's amazing.
No.
Yeah.
It's 50 or 80 or it's a
Wow.
big number.
Man, I'm really behind then. I gotta like up my game here.
Right. Yeah. So in 2020, I made a resolution to read 26 books in a year. So one every 2 weeks. Which before that, I've never. I don't think maybe one a year would be how much I would read.
Yeah.
And so it started out great because I don't really read, so I started out. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to listen to an audio book on the way to work and back.
Mm-hmm.
And then in March, we couldn't go to work anymore, so I stopped reading. And never really picked it back up. But to answer the question, I would say it's not really a business book necessarily. It is for my profession, but the price we pay, I found to be really fascinating. It's a book on the author is a Johns Hopkins physician, and he traveled around America and really identified all the detailed issues with the American healthcare system.
Oh,
and
wow.
all the moving pieces that have created some inefficiencies. I think the government, a lot of people like to point the finger at insurance carriers, which to a certain extent is true, but our system doesn't get this flawed if the hospitals and the physicians and the pharmacy companies and the government are all not part of the problem. And he does a great job of outlining where all those various entities have contributed to the problem of our healthcare system. And so it's a very fascinating book. I'd highly recommend it. It's long, but it's extremely detailed and will peel back the onion, probably even more so than you may think is possible.
No, I believe you. I mean, my short stint in insurance, it's insanely complicated and twisted, and there's so many layers to it, and it's not as simple as people may even like, oh, why don't they just do this with the insulin, or why don't they just? It's all like so messed up, and there's just so many more players and variables than people realize, right? Like the whole system is just a big jumbled piece of like yarn, right? It's like just It's all intertwined, it's so bad.
It is. It's all interconnected, and people are like, "Well, if you just do this, it'll solve this." Well, yeah, but if you do, you got to learn the cause. He does a great job of outlining the cause and effect of each of those pieces,
That's right.
and then
That's right.
Even goes into ACA and the inner workings of what happened behind the scenes and how those decisions impacted different decisions. And it like I said, it's fascinating. It's long, but it's fascinating if you can.
I'll check it out.
Take the time to check it out.
I will. Last question, Robert. So when you're not building your business and you're not being a super dad, what do you do for fun?
I love to golf. It is the one area or the one thing I think I can do that can completely, the release, I guess, if you will, where I can get my mind off of life, because you kind of have to when you play golf. So I love to golf. I love playing sports with my kids, when they're playing football or baseball. Love to snow ski, and then love to go out on the boat on Lake Travis and spend some time. So spending time with friends and doing some type of activity is kind of what drives me.
It's awesome. Great answers, man. I love it. Very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show, and I really appreciate you sharing so much of your story and your parenting life.
You bet. This was an honor. Appreciate the invite, and best of luck going forward.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see each other in one of these future events.
Absolutely. We sure will.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Girl Dad Show. We really hope you enjoyed that interview, and as always, please take a moment to review, rate, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.